They were not crowned monarchs, yet their collection of jewels could easily have rivalled any royal treasury in Europe. Some even whispered that the Romanovs themselves, those icons of imperial splendour, looked upon their treasures with envy, but these were far more than mere ornaments. Each piece was a masterpiece, a creation born from the genius of Cartier and Chaumet, designed to shimmer beneath the grand chandeliers of Imperial Russia's most glittering courts. Yet, as with so many tales of opulence, behind the brilliance came the murmur of scandal, the gathering of dark shadows, and eventually a haunting silence. What became of this legendary family and their extraordinary jewels? From a wedding tiara carved from pure rock crystal to diamonds once linked to a doomed and tragic queen, this is not simply the story of precious stones, it is a story of beauty entwined with peril, of ambition shadowed by destiny, and of a family whose immense fortune gleamed at the very edge of history before vanishing into mystery. Who were these people of dazzling wealth and quiet tragedy? What fate awaited their treasures, once so radiant beneath imperial light? And why, after all these years, does the world speak of them only in hushed tones? Let us begin the long-forgotten chronicle of the House of Yusupov. Before we truly reach the heart of this story and meet the extraordinary individuals whose lives became forever entwined with these magnificent treasures in the 20th century, it is worth pausing for a moment to understand exactly who this remarkable family was. For countless generations, the Yusupovs were not merely wealthy, they were one of the enduring pillars of Russian aristocracy. Their lineage was ancient, tracing its roots far back to the noble Tatar Khans of the Nogai horde, a heritage that gave their name both prestige and mystique. Their influence throughout Imperial Russia was immense, rivalled only by that of the mighty Romanovs themselves. They were the custodians of opulence, presiding over legendary palaces that stood as wonders of architecture and design, their halls adorned with masterpieces that could easily hold their own beside the finest collections in all of Europe. Their fortune was vast, immeasurable by ordinary standards, and yet it was not the result of sudden gain or fleeting luck. It was the product of centuries of refinement, taste, and inheritance, a legacy carefully built and preserved by successive generations. From the late 18th century through the grand 19th, the Yusupovs were celebrated as true connoisseurs, patrons of art, music and culture, as well as passionate collectors of rare beauty. They roamed the great capitals of Europe, commissioning painters, sculptors, and above all, jewellers to create wonders worthy of their name. Every acquisition told a story. Every gem carried history within it. Thus, by the time our main figures step into the light of this narrative, the inheritance they received, the glittering collection we are about to explore, was already steeped in centuries of history, artistry, and incomparable value. And now we arrive at the figures standing at the very heart of our tale. Prince Felix Yusupov, a man whose charm was undeniable and whose life, one might delicately say, was as controversial as it was captivating, and his wife, the radiant Princess Irina. She was no ordinary noblewoman. She was the beloved niece of the last Tsar, Nicholas II, a connection that placed the couple at the very core of Russia's glittering yet crumbling imperial world. It was through their hands, amid some of the most turbulent and perilous years imaginable, that many of the Yusupov family's legendary jewels would pass. These treasures, symbols of elegance and power, witnessed the grandeur of courtly life and the shadows of its downfall. Some pieces were tenderly preserved, cherished as fragments of a vanished age, while others were reluctantly surrendered, sold in moments of quiet despair as exile tightened its grip. And then there were those that simply vanished into the abyss of history, lost forever to time and chaos. Theirs is a story that moves from brilliance to heartbreak, from the splendour of imperial salons to the loneliness of exile. It is quite a journey indeed, one where every diamond, every pearl, seems to echo the rise and fall of a family who once shimmered at the very edge of history itself. When Prince Felix Yusupov finally came into his inheritance, guided still by the poised and ever-graceful presence of his mother, the renowned Princess Zinaida, the Yusupov family's jewel collection had already achieved near-mythic status. It was spoken of in hushed admiration across Europe, not merely for its size or extravagance, but for the immense historical gravity and royal lineage woven into so many of its pieces. These were far more than ornaments of beauty. They were living artifacts, tangible connections to empresses, kings, and the defining moments of European history. Each gem seemed to carry with it whispers of the courts it had once adorned and the hands that had once clasped it. Among these legendary treasures, few were as captivating as the La Pellegrina pearl, one of the true crown jewels of the Yusupov legacy. It is often mistaken for another famous gem, La Peregrina, yet the Yusupov Pellegrina was a marvel in its own right. A luminous, perfectly formed, large oval pearl of remarkable lustre and grace. Princess Zinaida herself was often immortalised in portraits and photographs wearing it, sometimes as a breathtaking pendant that caught the light like moonlight upon silk. This exquisite pearl had graced the Yusupov family since the early 19th century, acquired in the year 1826 by an earlier matriarch, the distinguished Tatiana Vasilievna, and had since been passed lovingly through generations as both treasure and talisman. And as fate would have it, this very pearl would become one of the few precious relics Felix managed to carry with him when Russia's imperial world collapsed into chaos. Its journey, as we shall discover, would prove just as fascinating as the family that once called it their own. And then there were those extraordinary pieces bound by direct threads to one of history's most tragic and captivating queens. Among the Yusupov treasures were several intimate possessions that had once belonged to none other than Marie Antoinette herself. Of these, the most breathtaking were a pair of diamond earrings of astonishing beauty and grandeur. These were no ordinary stones. They were immense, one weighing more than 14 carats, the other exceeding 20, their brilliance said to rival even the stars above Versailles. They had been purchased in Paris by Tatiana Yusupova in the 19th century, a woman of impeccable taste and refined sensibility, who understood that jewels were as much about legacy as they were about splendour. Imagine, for a moment, possessing something that had once graced the ears of such a legendary and ill-fated figure, a queen whose very name became a symbol of both opulence and downfall. It is little wonder that, in later years, Felix would look upon these remarkable earrings not merely as heirlooms of beauty, but as lifelines of survival when destiny took a cruel and irreversible turn. Yet, these were only part of the Yusupovs' glittering trove. Their collection glittered with diamonds of truly world-class distinction, each with a story that shimmered through time. One of the brightest among them was the magnificent Polar Star diamond, a gem of more than 40 carats, its radiance both literal and symbolic. This exceptional stone, believed to have once belonged to Joseph Bonaparte, the elder brother of Napoleon, eventually found its way into Yusupov hands through the ever-discerning Princess Tatiana Yusupova. It was famed not only for its size, but for the ethereal fire of its light, a brilliance that would later illuminate and at times haunt Felix's own life in exile. The Polar Star was not merely a jewel, it was a witness to history, a gem whose path intertwined with power, downfall, and survival. Its story, like that of its owners, was far from over, and we shall return to it as its destiny unfolds in the chapters ahead. Another extraordinary diamond within the Yusupov vaults was the one known as the Sultan of Morocco, a gem of striking beauty and quiet majesty. This exquisite cushion-cut stone, shimmering with a rare greyish-blue hue and weighing more than 35 carats, was a masterpiece of nature itself. It had been acquired in the year 1840 by Prince Nikolai Borisovich Yusupov, the great-grandfather of Felix, a man renowned for both his taste and his discerning eye for rarity. Blue diamonds are among the rarest wonders ever unearthed, and this one, with its cool, mysterious fire, was treasured as one of the family's most prized possessions. Like the legendary polar star, the story of the Sultan of Morocco did not end with the Russian Revolution. It would go on to have a destiny of its own, one that gleamed far beyond the fallen empire. But not all the Yusupov gems were defined solely by their weight or brilliance. Some became immortal through the influence they cast upon culture itself. Among them was a light pink diamond of approximately 17.5 carats, known intriguingly as the ram's head. Its form was said to be somewhat unusual, its subtle curves reminiscent, perhaps, of the creature for which it was named. Sadly, no known photograph of it has survived, but its legend endures through a most unexpected connection. This diamond later came into the possession of Daisy Fellows, the fabulously stylish heiress and muse of early 20th century society. When she once showed the gem to the visionary fashion designer Elsa Schiaparelli, the designer was instantly entranced by its electrifying hue, a vivid, luminous pink, unlike any she had seen before. That moment of inspiration gave birth to what would become Schiaparelli's most iconic creation, the now legendary colour known as shocking pink. It is remarkable, isn't it, how a single gemstone, once resting in the hands of Russian nobility, could spark a revolution not in politics, but in art and fashion. Such is the enduring power of beauty, the way it transcends time, history, and even the fall of empires. Finally, among the many inherited marvels of the Yusupov treasure, there was one creation that stood apart for both its splendour and its imperial legacy, a breathtaking necklace composed of lustrous black pearls. These were no ordinary pearls, but jewels of legend, each one said to have once belonged to none other than Catherine the Great herself, the formidable Empress of Russia. According to the tale passed down through generations, Catherine, in a gesture of deep affection, bestowed these pearls upon her most trusted favourite, Prince Grigory Potemkin, the brilliant statesman and general who shared both her vision and her heart. Potemkin, in turn, left them to his beloved niece, Tatiana Vasilievna, a woman of beauty and grace who would later marry into the Yusupov family. Through that union, the pearls already steeped in the history of empire and passion became part of the Yusupov inheritance, linking their name forever to the grandeur of Russia's imperial court. So, when Felix and Irina later wore or even held this extraordinary necklace, they were not merely adorning themselves with rare jewels, they were quite literally touching a fragment of their nation's past, a tangible echo of Catherine's glittering reign. And like the fabled La Pellegrina pearl, this necklace too would journey far from its native land. When Felix fled Russia amid the storms of revolution, he carried it with him, its dark iridescence, a silent witness to both loss and survival. Its next chapter would unfold across the ocean in the restless promise of America, a land where even imperial treasures would have to find a new story. And so, it becomes clear that the Yusupov collection rested upon an extraordinary foundation, one built not only on immense material wealth, but on centuries of heritage and meaning. Each jewel in their possession was more than a treasure. It was a fragment of history, a relic of empires, and a reflection of generations who had cherished art and beauty as their birthright. Into this dazzling inheritance, Prince Felix Yusupov would soon welcome his bride, the luminous Princess Irina Romanova. Their union, celebrated in the winter month of February in the year 1914, stood as one of the final grand spectacles of Imperial Russia, a glittering moment of elegance before the storm of history forever altered the world they knew. Felix, among the wealthiest and most distinguished young men in all of Russia, was marrying the Tsar's only niece, a woman whose royal bloodline and grace made her the embodiment of imperial prestige. It was, as one might imagine, an affair of breathtaking magnificence, and such a marriage demanded adornments worthy of its scale and symbolism. To mark the occasion, a host of new jewels were commissioned, creations that would dazzle even amidst the splendour of St. Petersburg's nobility. Many of these masterpieces were ordered personally by Felix, while others were the lavish gifts of his mother, the ever-generous and impeccably stylish Princess Zinaida. They turned to the greatest jewellery houses of the era, those legendary Parisian ateliers, Cartier and Chaumet, whose names had become synonymous with artistry, innovation and eternal glamour. Thus, with every gemstone chosen, every tiara conceived, and every jewel set into shimmering metal, the story of the Yusupovs entered a new chapter, one defined by love, opulence, and the final, golden glow of a world on the brink of transformation. Among the many wonders created to celebrate the Yusupov-Romanov union, few were as breathtaking or as frequently admired as Princess Irina's wedding tiara. Crafted by the legendary house of Cartier, it was a creation of rare imagination and ethereal grace. Unlike the traditional diamond tiaras that glittered at court, this one possessed an otherworldly quality. It was masterfully fashioned from carved rock crystal, platinum and diamonds, its translucent shimmer catching the light in a way that made it appear as though it was sculpted from frozen air. The effect was almost celestial, delicate, luminous, and impossibly refined. Originally made in the year 1911, the tiara was acquired by Felix in the early months of 1914, just before their magnificent wedding. Surviving photographs show Princess Irina on her wedding day, her serene face framed by that extraordinary tiara and a veil of lace that seemed to float around her like mist. Some claimed the veil had once belonged to the doomed Queen Marie Antoinette, while others, notably Irina's mother, Grand Duchess Xenia, insisted it had been hers. Whichever the truth, the image remains one of haunting beauty, the young princess crowned in light, standing at the very pinnacle of Russia's imperial splendour. Yet the Cartier creation was only one of the marvels that adorned the Yusupov bride. There was also the magnificent sunburst tiara, commissioned by Princess Zinaida herself as a wedding gift for her daughter-in-law. This masterpiece came from the Parisian house of Chaumet and was designed with brilliant ingenuity. At its heart lay a setting intended for a gemstone of truly spectacular importance, a jewel worthy of the Yusupov name. According to Chaumet's own archives, that central stone was meant to be none other than the family's celebrated Polar Star diamond, the legendary 40-carat gem that had dazzled generations. Distinct from a somewhat similar tiara crafted by Cartier, the Chaumet sunburst could be recognised by its refined border of delicate round diamonds that framed its radiant form. It was a creation that combined architectural precision with poetic light, a true symbol of grace, lineage, and the fleeting perfection of a world soon to vanish. Chaumet, ever the master of artistry and innovation, also created for Princess Irina a remarkable ruby tiara, an exquisite piece that reflected both ingenuity and versatility. This was yet another of her splendid wedding gifts, and it was designed with a brilliance that allowed transformation at will. The tiara's framework was ingeniously constructed so that its central rubies could be removed and replaced with other gemstones, emeralds, sapphires, luminous pearls, or even grand diamonds depending on the occasion or the ensemble chosen by the princess. When adorned with its fiery rubies, it possessed a dramatic and regal intensity, glowing like captured sunlight through stained glass. But the splendour did not end there. No collection befitting a princess, and certainly not one bearing the Yusupov name, would be complete without a suite of emeralds. To complement the ruby tiara, Chaumet fashioned an extraordinary emerald parure for Irina, one that embodied both majesty and refinement. At its centre was a magnificent devant de corsage, a large decorative ornament designed to be worn on the bodice, which could be adapted into different configurations depending on the occasion. Its focal point was an astonishing triangular cut emerald of roughly 14 carats, its deep green colour evoking the mystery of forest shadows and the opulence of empire. This particular emerald carried its own lineage of prestige, for it had originally graced a pendant once belonging to the elegant Princess Zinaida herself. By incorporating it into Irina's new parure, Chaumet symbolically united past and present mother and daughter-in-law through a shared inheritance of grace and splendour. The set was completed with a pair of perfectly matched earrings, each featuring radiant stones that caught the light with the same mesmerising depth. Together, the tiara, the corsage ornament, and the earrings formed a vision of timeless luxury, a testament to artistry, legacy, and the enduring language of jewels. It is also intriguing to note that in later years Prince Felix took the time to compile a jewellery album, a kind of personal chronicle of the Yusupov treasures. Within its pages lies a particularly curious and revealing detail involving one of the emerald pieces. In the album, Felix appears to have combined an image of this family jewel with an illustration taken from an auction catalogue of the Russian crown jewels. The result is a depiction of a magnificent brooch that, in truth, never existed in that precise form. It was a subtle blending of fact and imagination, a reminder of how memory and nostalgia can sometimes intertwine to create their own version of reality. This small yet fascinating act shows that even for those who lived amidst such splendour, the line between history and remembrance could become beautifully blurred. Beyond this singular example, the scale of Chaumet's craftsmanship for the Yusupovs was nothing short of extraordinary. The Parisian Maison was commissioned to create not one or two, but 5 complete parures, lavish jewellery sets for Princess Irina, each dedicated to one of the 5 great classic gemstones: diamonds, emeralds, pearls, rubies, and sapphires. To imagine such a commission is to glimpse the very height of imperial luxury, a world where beauty seemed limitless and where each gemstone spoke to status, love, and tradition. It is almost impossible to grasp the magnitude of such a gift, an offering that reflected not only the Yusupovs' vast wealth, but also their deep devotion to grace, art, and legacy. Through these creations, they sought to honour their new princess, and, in doing so, affirm their place at the pinnacle of Russia's aristocracy. These were jewels made not merely to adorn, but to embody a vision of permanence, a vision of a world that at the time felt eternal. They sparkled in the candlelight of imperial courts, glittering as symbols of power, refinement, and continuity in a society that seemed unshakable until history, with all its force, proved otherwise. But that glittering world, so dazzling, so seemingly eternal, was not destined to endure. The winds of change had begun to howl across Russia, fierce and unrelenting, sweeping away centuries of empire and privilege. For all their vast fortune and influence, even the Yusupovs could not escape the gathering storm. And, in a twist of fate, it was Prince Felix himself who would come to play a fateful part in accelerating its arrival. In December of 1916, Felix became one of the central figures in one of the most notorious events in Russian history, the assassination of Grigory Rasputin, the mystic whose influence over the imperial family had become both infamous and divisive. His reasons remain a matter of speculation. Some call it patriotism, others personal vengeance, still others desperation, but whatever his true motives, the consequences were immense. The murder not only shook the foundations of the Romanov dynasty, but also cast a long and dark shadow over the Yusupov name. In the aftermath, Felix was exiled to one of his distant family estates, a punishment that, ironically, may have spared him and Princess Irina from the immediate chaos that soon engulfed Petrograd. Yet, it was already clear their golden world was beginning to crumble. The revolution that followed in the year 1917 brought with it the abdication of the Tsar and the terrifying rise of the Bolsheviks. The grand salons of St. Petersburg fell silent, and the old order, their order, was swiftly collapsing. Amid this uncertainty, Felix made a decision born of both love and foresight, one that would shape the fate of the Yusupov legacy for generations. Realizing that the world they had known was ending, he resolved to conceal the family's greatest treasures. This was no simple act of hiding a few jewels. It was a monumental effort to protect a dynasty's soul. He secreted away a vast portion of their collection, including many of Princess Irina's magnificent wedding tiaras and the 5 glittering peras we have just spoken of, hoping against hope that one day, when peace returned, they might reclaim what had been theirs. It was an act, both tragic and noble, the preservation of beauty in the face of ruin, a final attempt to guard the brilliance of an empire, even as its light was being extinguished. These priceless treasures were concealed with utmost care in a specially constructed strong room hidden beneath a grand staircase in the Yusupovs' Moscow palace on Bolshoi Karatonyevsky Lane. It was a secret chamber, known only to a trusted few, a vault built not merely of stone and steel, but of hope. One can almost imagine Felix and Irina, perhaps with trembling hands and heavy hearts, overseeing the concealment of their family's legacy, believing that one day, when the storm had passed, they might return to reclaim what was rightfully theirs. The task itself must have been fraught with tension and peril, an almost impossible feat to accomplish as the world around them descended into chaos and revolution. Yet not every treasure could be left to the mercy of chance. Some jewels were far too valuable, too personally significant, or simply too small and precious to abandon. With his trademark resourcefulness and composure under pressure, Felix carefully selected a number of the family's most extraordinary gems, those whose worth went beyond gold and carat weight. Alongside these were a few key pieces of jewellery, chosen as both mementos and means of survival. These select treasures would become their silent companions, as Felix and Irina embarked on the perilous journey that would lead them away from their beloved homeland forever. By the year 1919, the situation in Crimea, where many members of the Russian aristocracy had sought refuge, had become desperate. The tides of revolution were closing in, leaving no hope of return. It was then that Felix, Irina, and their young daughter joined the Dowager Empress, Maria Fyodorovna, and other Romanov relatives in a daring escape aboard the British warship HMS Marlborough. As the ship pulled away from the Crimean coast, they gazed for the last time upon the land that had once been their world, a world now lost to history. What they carried with them were not merely jewels, but fragments of an entire civilization's vanished grandeur. Those few rescued pieces, the diamonds, the pearls, the heirlooms of centuries, would soon take on a new and humbler role. No longer symbols of status and splendour, they became the Yusupovs' lifeline in exile, their bridge between the memory of unimaginable wealth and the harsh reality of survival in a world that had been reborn from the ashes of their own. For several long years after the Yusupovs fled their homeland, that secret strong room beneath the staircase of their Moscow palace remained untouched, a silent crypt preserving the final echo of a vanished world. Behind its steel door lay not just treasure, but memory itself, the last tangible remnants of an empire that no longer existed. Felix, ever the optimist beneath his charm, must have held onto a fragile hope that someday he might return to reclaim his family's heritage, to unlock that hidden chamber and revive a fragment of their lost grandeur. But that day, like the empire itself, never came. Instead, it was the summer of 1925 when fate intervened. During routine renovation work at what was now a nationalised building under Soviet control, a group of workmen stumbled upon something peculiar, an oddly plastered archway deep within the basement. Curiosity led them to chip away at the wall until a heavy steel door emerged from the shadows, and behind that door they found a sight that would leave even the hardened Bolshevik officials astonished. There, resting in the darkness, were 7 massive chests, each one brimming with wonders. Between folds of old clothing, used as padding, they uncovered a dazzling cache of Yusupov treasures, more than a ton of silver tableware, ancient goblets and ladles of intricate design, and around 13 kilograms of solid gold artifacts. But most astonishing of all were the jewels, hundreds upon hundreds of them, glittering like captured starlight. The official inventory recorded 255 brooches, 42 bracelets, and at least 12 tiaras. Among them, beyond any doubt, were many of Princess Irina's magnificent wedding pieces: the ethereal Cartier rock crystal tiara, the radiant Chaumet sunburst, the dramatic ruby tiara, and the exquisite components of those 5 incomparable parias. It was, by any measure, a treasure worthy of kings, an entire dynasty's splendour suddenly in the possession of the new Soviet state. Yet for all its beauty, the discovery marked the final, tragic end of the Yusupov jewels as works of art and heritage. There would be no secret retrieval, no quiet restoration to a family vault, no new generation of Yusupov women to wear them beneath the glow of candlelight. Their fate was sealed, not by theft or neglect, but by the revolution itself, the same storm that had swept away the family who once gave those jewels their meaning. The Soviet government, unsurprisingly, had its own intentions for this unexpected windfall. To the new regime, these were not heirlooms of a fallen nobility. They were assets, valuable commodities in a nation starved for foreign currency and resources. Some of the most historically or artistically significant items were spared immediate destruction and placed on public display. In the summer of 1925, a series of photographs was taken, now famous among historians, showing officials and expert jewellers standing over tables piled high with the Yusupov treasure. Under the harsh light, tiaras, necklaces, and brooches glittered one final time, their brilliance frozen forever on fragile black and white film. Among them, one can clearly discern several of Princess Irina's own tiaras, their delicate silhouettes still intact, moments before their inevitable undoing. Yet preservation, at least in the sense the Yusupovs would have understood it, was never the goal. The fledgling Soviet state needed hard currency more than history, survival more than sentiment. Once the cataloguing was complete and the exhibitions ended, the grim process of utilisation began. Piece by piece, these masterpieces of Parisian artistry creations that had once graced imperial salons and royal courts were dismantled with clinical precision. Gemstones, large and small, were pried from their platinum and gold settings. The mounts themselves, exquisite works of craftsmanship in their own right, were melted down without ceremony, reduced to their raw metal value. The liberated stones, stripped of their history, were then quietly sold abroad, often through discreet transactions designed to raise much-needed funds for the new regime. And so, the glorious Yusupov tiaras, the very ones Princess Irina had worn with such effortless grace, the ones that represented the height of Cartier and Chaumet's artistry, were lost forever. They would never again adorn a royal head or shimmer under the chandeliers of a ballroom. All that remains of them now are faded photographs, delicate sketches preserved in archives, and the lingering memory of a world extinguished. The jewels that once symbolised beauty, power, and legacy became instead relics of absent silent witnesses to the end of an era. And yet, in one of history's more poignant turns, the allure of these lost imperial treasures refused to fade away. Decades after their destruction, fascination with the Yusupov jewels endured proof that beauty, even when shattered, has a way of surviving in memory. So deep was this enduring admiration that, in the year 2018, a remarkable decision was made in Russia to recreate one of Princess Irina's most celebrated pieces, her ethereal wedding tiara designed by Cartier. The jewellery house Agonov undertook the delicate task, crafting a magnificent replica from silver, carved rock crystal, and gleaming topaz. The finished creation was then presented as a gift to the Yusupov Palace on the Moika River in St. Petersburg. Today, this recreated tiara rests in that historic palace, offering visitors a hauntingly beautiful echo of the original masterpiece. Though it is but a reflection of what once was, it stands as a quiet yet powerful testament to the endurance of beauty, memory, and the human desire to preserve what time and turmoil have taken away. While a vast portion of the Yusupov treasures met their tragic end in that hidden Moscow vault, Felix and Irina were not left entirely destitute when they began their new life in exile. The jewels they had managed to smuggle out of Russia, their carefully chosen selection of heirlooms and gemstones, became their most precious resource. These few remaining pieces were more than ornaments. They were survival itself. Paris in the 1920s was a haven for displaced nobility, a glittering yet melancholy world of exiled princes, princesses, and aristocrats, all striving to rebuild lives from the ashes of lost empires. For the Yusupovs, it meant adapting from unimaginable wealth to precarious reinvention. Ever resourceful, Felix and Irina opened a fashion house, cleverly combining their names into a single brand, Earth. The venture enjoyed modest success in its early years, appealing to the wealthy international elite who were drawn to the mystique of exiled Russian glamour. Yet business in post-war Europe was uncertain, and survival required capital. That capital, more often than not, came from the slow and painful sale of their remaining jewels. Piece by piece, stone by stone, the Yusupovs dismantled their portable heritage, transforming the symbols of their past into the currency of endurance. The great Parisian jewellers, particularly Cartier, played an instrumental role in this process, acting both as brokers and buyers. Through their hands passed the final remnants of one of Europe's most fabled collections. And so, from the ruins of empire to the boulevards of Paris, the story of the Yusupov jewels entered a new and bittersweet chapter 1, defined not by splendour, but by survival. Let us now follow the journeys of those few surviving pieces, the ones that escaped Russia with Felix and Irina, and trace the extraordinary paths they would take through the decades that followed. The magnificent La Pellegrina pearl, an heirloom steeped in centuries of Yusupov history, and so often seen adorning the elegant Princess Irina, remained one of the most cherished treasures in Prince Felix's possession. Unlike so many other jewels sold in haste or necessity, this one he held close for many years, a token not merely of wealth, but of memory. Its smooth, luminous surface seemed to carry the essence of the family's former grandeur, a fragile link to the vanished world of Imperial Russia. Felix treasured the pearl through decades of exile, and such was his pride in it that he even allowed it to be exhibited publicly in London in the year 1935. Visitors who saw it there marvelled at its size and its soft, silvery glow, a beauty untouched by time or tragedy. Yet even the most sentimental treasures could not forever resist the realities of life in exile. Eventually, in the year 1953, circumstances compelled Felix to part with the beloved heirloom. He sold it to the distinguished Genevan jeweller, Jean Lombard, marking the end of an era in which the Pellegrina had remained in Yusupov hands for well over a century. But like all things touched by legend, the story of the Pellegrina pearl did not end there. Decades later, in 1989, it resurfaced under the lights of a Christie's auction in Geneva. Collectors and historians alike were captivated, and when the bidding concluded, the pearl fetched an extraordinary sum, proof of its enduring beauty and the historical magic it carried. After that, it vanished once more, this time into the privacy of an unknown collection. Still, wherever it rests today, one can imagine its gentle shimmer continuing to whisper the story of the Yusupovs, a story of elegance, endurance, and the fleeting brilliance of a world long gone. Then there were the extraordinary diamond earrings, once worn by none other than Marie Antoinette jewels, whose very existence seemed to bridge the worlds of tragedy, beauty, and history. With their royal provenance and remarkable size, they were among the most valuable and storied pieces in the Yusupov collection. Each stone was magnificent in its own right, one weighing more than 14 carats, the other over 20, together forming a pair of breathtaking brilliance. It was inevitable that, when the time came, these earrings would become one of Felix's most significant assets. In the year 1928, necessity led him to part with them. The buyer was none other than Pierre Cartier, whose keen eye for historic gems and understanding of provenance made him the ideal intermediary. Later that same year, Cartier sold the earrings to the distinguished American heiress Marjorie Merriweather Post, one of the world's foremost collectors of fine art and Russian imperial treasures. Mrs. Post, known for her impeccable taste and sense of preservation, had the earrings delicately modernised first by Cartier himself and later by the legendary jeweller Harry Winston. Both artisans approached the task with great reverence, ensuring that the essence and grace of their royal origins were never lost. Through Mrs. Post's generosity, these remarkable jewels found a destiny far more democratic than their past could have predicted. In 1964, her daughter donated the earrings to the Smithsonian Institution in Washington District of Columbia, where they became part of the National Gem Collection at the National Museum of Natural History. Today, they rest beneath carefully lit glass, admired by thousands of visitors each year, each person catching a glimpse of the same light that once graced a doomed queen, an exiled prince, and the hands of master jewellers who preserved their story. There is something quietly wonderful about that, isn't there? To think that a pair of earrings born in royal courts, carried through revolution and exile, should at last come to rest where anyone, no matter their station, can stand before them and share in their beauty, their history, and their remarkable journey through time. The Polar Star diamond stood as one of the crown jewels of the Yusupov collection, a gem of near-mythical beauty and brilliance. It was among the few treasures Felix successfully smuggled out of Russia, ensuring its survival through the chaos of revolution and exile. Yet, unlike some of the other family jewels that found quick buyers, the Polar Star's path would be far more intricate, a tale not merely of ownership, but of endurance, necessity, and transformation. During the long, uncertain years of exile, Felix found himself repeatedly forced to part with the stone temporarily at least. He would often pawn the diamond to Cartier in London, a trusted intermediary and one of the few establishments that still treated the exiled nobility with a measure of discretion and respect. For many displaced aristocrats, this became a means of survival, a way to raise enough money to endure, always with the hope of reclaiming what had been pledged once fortune turned again. Eventually, however, the moment came when even Felix's attachment to the Polar Star could not withstand the practical demands of life. In the year 1928, Cartier sold the diamond on his behalf to Lady de Turding, the elegant wife of Sir Henry de Turding, founder of Royal Dutch Shell. In her possession, the stone entered a new chapter of glamour. Cartier created for Lady de Turding a breathtaking necklace, setting the Polar Star at its centre and surrounding it with vivid emeralds, a design that perfectly balanced opulence and harmony, allowing the diamond's pale fire to shine ever brighter. Decades later, in November of 1980, the Polar Star surfaced once more, this time at a Christie's auction in Geneva. Under the watchful eyes of collectors and connoisseurs, the diamond achieved a remarkable price of 8 million Swiss francs, approximately $5,100,000 at the time, an extraordinary sum that testified to its continued prestige and mystique. In 2008, another diamond of similar size and quality was sold for nearly $7 million, its seller invoking the Polar Star by name as a benchmark of brilliance and historical value. Even today, the precise lineage of the stone remains a subject of fascination among gemologists and historians. Whether in royal hands or within the velvet-lined vaults of modern collectors, the Polar Star continues to embody the enduring allure of the Yusupov legacy, a gem that, like its name, has never ceased to shine. The rare greyish-blue Sultan of Morocco diamond was yet another of the Yusupovs' remarkable jewels to survive their flight from Russia. Like the other great stones in Felix's care, it made the perilous journey into exile, concealed and protected with the utmost discretion. This extraordinary cushion-cut diamond, weighing more than 35 carats, was prized for both its size and its unique colour, a soft, silvery blue that seemed to shimmer between shadow and light. Eventually, sometime between the years 1922 and 1925, Felix sold the gem through Cartier, whose connections and discretion made them the natural intermediaries for such transactions. For many years thereafter, the Sultan of Morocco seemed to disappear from public record, its trail fading into the private world of collectors. Then, in 1972, it resurfaced, sold for a considerable sum to an American collector in San Francisco. Even now, it remains one of the world's largest and most significant blue diamonds, a stone whose quiet mystery mirrors the lost grandeur of the house that once owned it. The tale of the pink ram's head diamond, however, ends on a far more sombre note. This unusual 17.5-carat gemstone, light pink in colour and named for the curious shape of its cut, was once among the Yusupov family's lesser-known but most distinctive treasures. After passing into the possession of the elegant heiress Daisy Fellows, it famously inspired fashion history itself. When Daisy showed the diamond to the visionary designer Elsa Schiaparelli, the designer was so captivated by its vivid hue that it inspired her now iconic, shocking pink colour, a tone that defined an era of haute couture. But the diamond's brilliance was not to last. Some years later, the ring that held the ram's headstone was stolen from Daisy Fellows, vanishing without a trace. Despite its distinctive hue and rarity, no hint of its whereabouts has ever been uncovered. It simply disappeared into legend, one of the great lost jewels of the 20th century, remembered only through whispers of its beauty and the colour it inspired. And finally, there remains the story of that hauntingly beautiful black pearl necklace, said to have once belonged to Catherine the Great herself. When Felix and Irina arrived in America in November of 1923, they brought the pearls with them, a decision that would lead to quite an ordeal. Upon their arrival, US customs officials impounded their jewels, demanding duties so exorbitant that the couple struggled to pay. Desperate, Felix managed to raise $12,000 of fortune for exiles at the time just to reclaim the necklace. He first attempted to sell the pearls himself, but without success. Ultimately, he turned once more to a trusted ally, Pierre Cartier, who advanced him a generous sum and swiftly found a buyer. In 1924, Cartier sold the necklace to Mathilde Townsend Gerry, an immensely wealthy American heiress, for the staggering price of $400,000, a figure equivalent to nearly $6 million in today's value. Mathilde herself later confessed that the purchase had been something of a moment of madness, though she never regretted the indulgence. Roughly a decade later, she sold the pearls, possibly to another affluent collector, Gertrude Boyce Thompson. From that point onward, the trail fades into mystery. Whether Mrs. Boyce Thompson kept the necklace, sold it again, or left it to her heirs, no record survives. Thus, the black pearls of Catherine the Great, the same that once gleamed at the imperial court and later crossed oceans with the exiled Yusupovs, vanished into the quiet anonymity of private ownership. Another great treasure of their house lost to time, its current resting place a secret history unto itself. The jewels of the Yusupovs, those radiant emblems of power, artistry, and fate, tell a story unlike any other, one woven from splendour and sorrow in equal measure. Each gemstone, each shimmering heirloom, once worn by Felix and Irina, reflects not just light, but history itself. Together, they chart the rise and fall of a family whose fortune was as dazzling as it was doomed. Though many of these masterpieces vanished into the tides of revolution and exile, Felix's foresight ensured that some fragments of their glory would endure. The preservation of treasures, such as the Polar Star diamond and the fabled Marie Antoinette earrings, allowed a part of their legacy to survive, shimmering faintly through time. And while the grand documented jewels eventually left Yusupov hands, whispers persist that a few personal pieces, small keepsakes, perhaps a brooch or a ring, still rest quietly with their descendants today. Faint echoes of a world long gone, yet never completely silenced. It is humbling to think how many stories remain locked within those jewels, secrets of love, ambition, betrayal, and endurance. Each gem, stripped of its setting or hidden in a private vault, carries unseen histories, silent witnesses to the fragility of human grandeur. One cannot help but wonder, which lost piece stirs your imagination most deeply? Is it the radiant polar star, the vanished pink ram's head, or perhaps the black pearls that once graced an empress and crossed an ocean in exile? The Yusupov saga reminds us that beauty and tragedy are often bound together, that what glitters brightest can also fade the fastest. And yet, even in their loss, these jewels continue to enchant, inspiring fascination more than a century later. Thank you for joining me on this journey through time and brilliance. If you found this story as captivating as I have, I'd be delighted if you left a like and subscribed for more tales from the glittering world of historic jewels. Until we meet again, may the light of history continue to shine in the stories we choose to remember.